to what we did last month, but specifically focused on, at a hyper-local level, what is gonna be the impact of these ballot proposals in our neighborhoods?
That's great.
No, absolutely.
That's fantastic.
That absolutely has to be a conversation. And it really goes back to, these are continuing conversations, so, you know, one forum hearing is not gonna cut it. I mean, we need to make sure that this is a common conversation that's normalized.
Yeah.
We have it regularly because things are still developing. There's just so much going on in the district, that we need to make sure that people know what's happening, what the
Yeah.
impacts are. And before I lose the thought, because I'm getting old, when I was talking about the census data, like if you look at the income for the district, I think if you look at now versus 10 years ago, you'll see that, oh no, we're earning more in the district. But part of that conversation also happens, means, okay, well, listen, we have more people who earn a certain amount, but we also have a significant portion of the district whose salaries haven't moved.
Right.
And then when you couple that with rents going up astronomically, you do have a significant portion of the district that can no longer afford to live here.
Right.
And, you know, and so to say that, okay, well, listen, and sometimes it's a vicious cycle too, because, okay, well, those people who can't afford it leave. Those who are more affluent come in, oh, guess what? We raised the amount of money in the district again. That top line sounds great, but we're not, what about the people on the middle to the bottom level? What's happening with them? And, and what happens to them? So in terms of housing, we wanna make sure we're having those kinds of conversations. When developers are coming in, when we're doing housing, what kind of housing do we want? Some of the questions I would like for us to consider, is, what is the housing mix? What do we look like as a district? I think one of the concerns I always have is especially, when the new developments come in, usually it's studios, one bedrooms, not necessarily a family-friendly mix. And especially when you have people are getting squeezed out of the housing because the housing prices are so high. Where do they go? So what are we doing for them? Are you squeezing 5 kids in a 2-bedroom apartment? So even making sure that we understand what is the mix in the district, to make sure that when we're having conversations, and this is important, I wanna make sure the board is prepared to have certain conversations. So if a developer comes in and said, okay, well listen, I wanna build studios and 1-bedrooms, we're in a position as a board to say, no. Our data shows we don't need studios and 1-bedrooms. We have enough studios and 1-bedrooms. We need, 3 bedrooms, or we need housing. We need homeownership opportunities.
Yeah.
And not to say that any one of those pieces that I put forward is something that we say we vote on and we say, yes, that's it. But the conversation should be about, what do we really need? And are we really getting the resources? It should be about resources for tenants, tenant advocacy. So against predatory landlords who are trying to jack up your rent 300% or whatever else, but you're in a rent stabilized apartment, maybe you don't know that. It should be about deed theft, making sure that you're protected in case somebody comes by and says you owe a water bill or something like that. So just sign this over, and I'll take care of it for you. I'm not necessarily reading those things. And there's a number of other things as well that I would like to build on. In terms of just from what I'm hearing here, these are great conversations that are being had. And what I love about it is we're getting smarter as a committee. Right? We're getting smart, which makes us smarter as a board, which helps us to get smarter as a district, and we just need to make sure we're pushing these things out.
Yeah.
And we're asking the questions.
Yeah.
Yes.
Go
I
ahead.
want to know zoning, okay, because I think a lot of this has something to do with zoning and the change of zoning in the area in this community. Because what I see is luxury apartment buildings coming into this community. I live on President Street, right between Franklin and Bedford, okay, and right next door to my house. Someone came along, they sold their house, and someone just decided they wanted to go up to, 4 stories, right next door. It was a 1-family house at one time. So anyone selling their home, people are not, I'm not gonna say people are not buying homes, but maybe in this community, either the information is not going out, or maybe no one wants to live in the community, I'm not sure, but I know developers love this community.
Yes.
And I know that, it may be very difficult for someone to be able to buy a $1.5 million home, just go to the bank and get a loan like that. The average person is not gonna be able to just go into a bank and say, I wanna purchase a home, and they're gonna be given a loan of 1 point anything. Okay, so that's part of what's going on too. The developers are the ones that have the money to be able to buy these homes that are being sold. But my thing is, when they get the home, it just amazes me how high they can go up in terms of what they build, because they're gonna take that one family home and it's going to be an apartment building, at least about 6 stories, 4 to 6 stories. So I would like to know about the zoning, because I thought that certain areas are zoned for, you know, even though they say, oh, well, they can build as long as it's, in right, if they're
As a
within the
right.
right, as right. But what is the right? I don't know. It seems like it changes. So how it changes, what is that process? Do we get any information, the community board get any information as to the change of zoning in the area in terms of what can be built in the neighborhood? Because whatever is being built, it's really outpricing the people who were living here for a long time.
Right.
It's just pricing them out. I mean, I'm hearing people moving to North Carolina, to Florida, because they can't afford to be in the neighborhood.
I'm gonna take a stab at the zoning, you wanna jump in as well?
Well, I guess I have a related question to that, which is, as we're laying out priorities for this is only my second meeting I've been to for the housing committee. I got edited this year and missed one of the 3 so far, so maybe I'm a little behind on Will's understanding of this, but as we're laying out like what our mission statement is going forward here, I guess I would appreciate some clarity in how like the remit of this group differs from like the land use and Euler committee that I think also exists. And I think, I'm not sure where your question fits in terms of like, do we also have a role in handling like zoning related questions, or is that the other?
That's something I would like to
committee?
know.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it goes all hand in housing, zoning, building, you know, I think it all goes hand in hand. I'm not sure, I know that there's a ULURP, committee, but, are they the ones responsible for zoning, or is, who's doing zoning?
The ULURP / land use committee handles the zoning piece of it. But to the point, the housing committee should really inform the needs in terms of the zoning.
Correct.
So that's part of the reason why these conversations are important, and that's why, you know, I was leading with the question, you know, with it's important for us to understand what the issues are, because by us saying these are the needs, it informs what the land use is advocating for in terms of, okay, well, if there's a zoning question, what do we need, or what should we allow, or whatever else. So, yeah, I mean, you know, we definitely wanna make sure that this committee is right, because it informs that, and you know, to the point, I think somebody, you know, I think you had said before, all these things are interconnected. So when we're talking about trains, when we're talking about infrastructure, when we're talking about, you know, whatever else, when we're talking about public safety, when we talk about education, all of it is interrelated in terms of what's the zoning, what's the housing, what's the population, what's the you know, the income of the population. How many seniors do we have? How many kids are in the district? And a whole host of other issues. To try and answer your question about the zoning, I'm gonna take a stab at it. There are people who are way better who, I'll try not to mangle it too bad. When it comes to zoning, the zoning, and we'll try and see if we can get a formal training, and perhaps it's good for the board to do that. Zoning for the district happens, and you'll hear a lot of terms like there's an R2 or an R3 or an R4, R6, 7, 8, and these letters behind it on occasion. Typically, the higher the number means the more dense, the more what they call FAR, floor area ratio, which means you have a bigger building. There are several different zones in the district. So, yeah, there are several different zones in the district where you see the higher buildings have higher zoning. In most places where you see the lower buildings, you have lower zoning. Not always true though. It's not always true. A lot of this CV9 is very different in the sense that if you talk to city planning, a lot of our zoning is mismatched to what you actually see built. So for example, around your President Street, you may see a lot of single family or 2-story homes. The zoning actually may not match that, where it actually allows for bigger buildings. So they call them what they call underbuilt.
Yeah.
So what you see is you may have developers come in and they'll buy a property there, and they say, I can knock this down because the zoning allows for me to go 2 extra stories. And guess what? With those 2 extra stories, I can rent those out and, you know, $4,000 a piece and make my mortgage and a nice healthy profit at the same time. So part of the problem that we have in the district is the mismatch. That's one. The other piece, and this is where a lot of the time you hear the questions come in. Hold on, let me say this. That can happen as of right. So that is an issue that we're dealing with in the district, where we have a lot of as of right things that don't look right because the zoning is mismatched to what's already built. The other piece of that is you do have a lot of development that happens in the district where somebody buys a property and says it's a property that I can only do I can only build up to, 2 stories. They have the ability to put in with the city planning, Office of City Planning, the City Planning Commission to say, well, you know what? I want to develop this property so that way I can go up to 4 or 5 stories, make up a number, whatever it is. And this is my business reason for doing this. City planning, and this is mostly what you hear about, can do a variance. And this is what ultimately they are, a variance. All right, well, listen, you want to develop on this property, we'll have to do an environmental analysis, we'll see what it does and all this other stuff and how it impacts and everything like that. And it goes through the land use process that I think most people are familiar with here. So what those end up being are what they call variances, and that goes through the process where it comes before the board, and they'll tell you, okay, it's an R2, they're looking to go to an R4 or whatever it is, and this is what they're trying to do, and they'll go to the hearings and they'll say, well, listen, this is what we're trying to do. I'm gonna say something controversial. I'm not necessarily opposed to development, but the question is always going to be, is it a variance that makes sense? And if it makes sense, what does the district give back for allowing you to do something that's otherwise contrary to what the zoning is? I might say, okay, well, listen, you can go up maybe another story or 2, just to make that scenario. If you said you're gonna build a park for the kids, there's a community benefit coming back for that. Okay, maybe that works. So maybe we can tell the developer, we can let you go a little bit higher because you're gonna give us a park, something we need. Or you know what, I'm gonna put a library in the bottom of it so you guys have a legit library in the district. Maybe it's a reason, maybe. And I just say that to say, it's incumbent upon us, and this is why I want all of our committees to think about what the community needs are, those are called community benefits, to think about, so if people come to us and say, I want a variance or I want to do something, what is the benefit we get back for it?
But they don't have to come to them.
They would have to come, here's the thing, if it's a variance, if they're asking for a zoning change, that is a variance, so they would have to have a conversation about what the benefits are. Now, with that being said, I'm sorry.
Is that with housing committee?
It goes
or-
through zoning. It goes through zoning,
You,
land use.
okay.
Now, but what I put that to say, the question in housing is, what are the mixes we need? What are the mixes we need? What are the requirements we have? Like, if they say they want to knock something down, but they're gonna put up a building where people could buy homes or condos, okay, maybe it's a conversation. So I just put that out there just in terms of the possibilities of what can happen. But what's important on the ground here is that we establish what do we need as a community. We need affordable housing, number one. We should figure out what the housing mix should look like in terms of, we don't need more studios, we need 2 bedrooms, we need 3 bedrooms, or whatever the mix looks like. And, I leave that to the committee to kind of figure out what those needs are. What are the other benefits that we would want from a housing perspective? What other needs do we need, period? So it's like, okay, listen, in housing, what kind of protections do you put on apartments? What kind of protections do you put on the apartments? Affordable housing to what bands? This goes back to the income thing I was saying before. If you're gonna put housing up there, but only, it's only housing if you earn over $100,000, what does that really do for us? Maybe the housing should be for those who earn,
That's correct.
yeah, another band below that.
Affordable.
Affordable,
Can afford.
and that's been an issue that we've had in terms of affordable to who is the refrain we've heard. So I just say that to put that on the floor in terms of things for the committee to consider. I'm sorry, Ms. Westerville, I saw your hand was up.
Yeah, I just wanna make a few comments on like the community benefits and things that developers often promise communities and how it really doesn't happen. We've seen in Atlantic Avenue area, Atlantic Yards, all the benefits that were promised to the community didn't happen, and the housing that was promised wasn't built, the affordable housing. And Bruce, I think his name's Bruce Ratner, the developer, he was fined because he didn't provide these promised benefits, and it was like, he was being fined $2,000 a day, but he's been forgiven of all of that, and he didn't have to do it. It hasn't been done, and it won't be done. And in fact, the repercussions for not doing that are not met by these developers. So oftentimes when you have this promise of community benefits or something they're gonna do, or it won't happen, it doesn't happen. So you have to be very careful in how we go about that, very careful.
I wanna touch on that because I think, and I'm gonna tie that into your question when you asked me, Chris, earlier about the feedback I was getting from speaking to voters, just putting it out there. And I think this is something that we as a committee need to think about when we talk about framing, because right now we have a vote in front of us, which is kind of, something's at the door, but I think just in general, what I'm finding, Chris, is that people are voting out of fear. People are voting like, you're gonna take this away from me, so I'm gonna vote to keep it. And I think that ties into exactly what you just said. So, I've not yet heard anyone on either side of the conversation speak to me in detail about developers. They just say developers like it's a monolithic word, and all developers of all sizes and all resources all do the same things. And I don't know, my question in that is, how do we get answers if we're moving forward with that kind of framing, right? So they're, just like residents, developers come in all shapes and sizes. And one of the things that we've not been able to see in the current sort of system we have is large developers, huge, big developers with a lot of resources are the lion's share of who are getting contracts and stuff, right? There's not a whole lot of conversation and percentage of smaller developers that are coming in to kind of, be heard or what they're bringing in. One of the things that I've seen in the district in the last 5 years, Rogers and Bedford, the commercial, the mom and pops, new kids, young people in their 20s and early 30s, finding whatever resources they can to start a bar or a cafe or something. I find that to be a positive thing. People are
Bedford and Rogers, where?
If you below Empire, there's a lot of new business popping up on
Oh, I
Rogers
thought you
and
meant a
Bedford.
development there,
No,
yeah.
no, I'm talking about just storefront, sidewalk, right? So, and the reason I say this is because we need, not just with affordable housing, right? Because the people that are making the lower bracket of income in this district, that is not going to change or increase comparatively with the cost of living. So we have to give these people an opportunity to find jobs in the district, not just affordable living. We have to give them the opportunity to pay for that affordable living, right? And I think the more that we create, I'm now starting to see stuff pop up on Flatbush where, the Midway Flats and the thing, they're packing them in, and that is like that's like ground born, just folks Irv's Bar was just a couple of guys that put together, and I think we need more of that in the conversation with affordable housing, because we're also giving the people that are gonna need the affordable housing an opportunity to be able to afford it. Because the to your point, the people that are already here that are gonna get outmatched based on, especially our elderly population who are on fixed incomes, that's just, there's very little we can do about that, simply because that is part of it.
Well,
Correct.
But we also need to keep our commercial zoning
right.
Correct,
intact,
correct,
because
so
we have
that's
so
why I'm
little.
bringing it up, yeah.
And the little bit we do have, we need to keep, because those are the places where jobs could actually be created.
Right,
And
right.
to your point, it's funny because economic development is right on the other side.
Right.
And they're having similar conversations in terms of what those
Right.
needs are. And
Right.
absolutely, and it goes back to the point you made earlier, it's all interconnected.
Right.
It is
Yeah.
all interconnected, so
Yeah, yeah.
in terms of what are the jobs, I'm happy you brought up seniors because should be talking about seniors, what are we doing in terms of housing to protect them, to make sure that they're able to stay in the neighborhood? Because especially when we talk about vulnerable populations, when you're retired, your money doesn't jump.
Right,
You
exactly.
know, you may get a cost of living allowance depending on what the federal government does when it's operating.
And we're not doing a good job of reaching out to seniors. We have no mailings, and most seniors I know are not online. A large percentage of them.
Agreed.
So-
No, understood.
Anybody over 80, really.
Yeah.
Where do we go
Most
from
what?
here?
I'm sorry.
Shirley's
They're not
not here
online.
anymore.
We need to reach them with mailers.
Outreach is definitely,
Yeah.
an
And that was
issue
one
that
of
I
the,
think-
yeah, that was actually one of the first.
We don't do any mailings.
So that was one of the first points that came out in terms of outreach, how are we doing these things, how we're reaching people. And again, it's like, you know, we're looking at different ways of doing that. Mailers are an option. The only problem that comes in with that might be the funding aspect of that. I don't want it to rule it out, but it's just a matter of, it should be a
There's
conversation.
a line item on the budget for mailers. We used to do them.
Yeah, not that kind, not that big a budget. The amount of money that it will cost.
Well,
to
we've
do kind of
never,
mailers we talk
there's
about.
not a budget amount in there, but there used to be years ago because it's on the, and I remember getting mailers, but that was, you know,
Right, mailers
more
typically, I
2
know,
decades ago.
the elected, that might be saying something.
And how do they do so many, like, you know, there's an election happening,
Different
and
budget
all I
lines.
get is robocalls.
Different budget lines. Now,
Yeah.
robocalls, now
Yeah.
here's the thing, robocalls are a plus and a minus. I'm not gonna say that CB&I couldn't do robocalls. It's an option, let me say that, robocalls are an option. Mailers tend to be a lot more funding intensive in terms of getting that.
Stamps and
it becomes
postage
a-
and
yeah,
everything,
stamps,
right,
postage,
but
You
all
get a
that
big
robocall
discount
is-
though if you do mass mailings.
I mean, here's the thing, but the mass, even with the discount, it still
Right.
might be prohibitive for us. Now, not to say, that's a conversation with the district manager to see what they can support.
Even one a year would help.
Yeah, and well, here's the thing, and perhaps it's a matter of having a conversation about what the one a year is, because I did hear you have a conversation about lien sales, which I think is something we wanna jump on early as well, just my thought in
Yeah.
terms of that.
That might be the.
But, yeah, I'm sorry, and
Then
Chris,
what
you
do
had
we-
asked an important question in terms of, what are we doing?
Yeah.
So,
Before we spiral out.
yeah, part of what I guess, and this is something we don't have to figure out tonight, but for the agenda for the next meeting, what are the priorities of the areas that as a committee you want to address? And it doesn't need to be a lot of them, but just what the focus should be. So if it's about lien sales, how do we address the lien sales, I think is important. I also think it's important that as a committee, if you guys accept it as well, I think it's important for us to get better information on the district in terms of what are really our needs. How many seniors do we have? And, you know, what things do we need to put around them to make sure that they are good? So if it's, access to resources like, what is it, for seniors, SCREE. SCREE is a program that the city has where it's like you can get your rent frozen if your income's within a certain band, you can have your rent frozen. So getting people access to that, getting people access to resources, those tenant resources, advocacy, if it's, you know, legal services that are required, those kinds of things, getting that out.
But
Again, to the-
there was a proposal I remember the city council had to do away with, people, like when you're a homeowner, you get almost like attacked by people coming to your door, sending you flyers, the yellow letters, do you know what the yellow letters are? Yellow letters are a notorious thing that real estate uses. They send you a letter that, and it appears like it's from a person. It's kind of a fake, you know, to lure people in for deed theft, into the different types of, you know, reverse mortgage, all these different things are happening continually, especially they look for, you can look online and you can find who's paid off their mortgage. Those are generally elderly people, and those people are targeted, like hardcore targeted, and they were gonna do away with allowing, the flyers and the real estate contact, that was gonna be done away with, but I don't believe it happened. But I'm still getting them constantly, you know, so are my neighbors, and
I think there's a lot of different ideas and views that have been shared tonight, and it's really healthy to have these sorts of debates and discussions, but as we're thinking about the time and taking that next step, I think would be helpful for us collectively to start to rally around what is the next thing we wanna discuss next month.
Exactly, and I think that's the agenda item. And as I say that,
Well, that's gonna depend on the election results on what,
Well, here's the
Ballot
thing, I
measure
think there's gonna be an
design.
advocacy that happens no matter what happens, in terms of, here's the thing, if the ballot amendment passes, okay, there's an advocacy, I think, is that people need to understand what this means and what the implications are of that. If it doesn't pass, I still think a conversation needs to be had in terms of, I'm not gonna say that, okay, well, the system is perfect as designed. There are things we should be doing on a
protect,
company's level.
protect people,
Well,
protect is one should be a main goal.
well, yeah, and that's the thing, I mean, in terms of, when we talk about
Protect
what,
and create, second.
well, and narrowing down, focusing in, what does that mean in protecting and creating? So I mean, if those are two categories, is great, but what are the activities underneath that we're looking at? And I say that, and I asked that to the committee, and this is an ask I'm having with all the committees in terms of, we just went through an exercise where we created a statement of needs. Part of the thing that's always been an issue is that the statement of needs doesn't spell out exactly what the community needs. As an example, we had a development. A developer came over and he said, well, I looked at your statement of needs and it says you need affordable housing.
7399 did that.
I didn't say
The
that.
ones who flipped it and are now have a TRO on their property.
Yeah, but the point is, during every process that we went to, they said, oh, well, we looked at your community needs statement, it said you need affordable housing. We should define what that means. And that's part of the work that I'm looking for from the committee. Define what is affordable housing. So again, well, no, I mean,
Because you know,
Well-
now this is taking me back,
under-
way back.
yeah.
For when they started with that word of
Exactly.
housing and everyone was like,
And
what
some of
does
that means,
mean?
and some of that means there's gonna have to be some training in terms of understanding, I mean, you know, I'm not sure what everybody's understanding is with AMI and how that's derived.
30% AMI.
Right, but what is 40% of what? So what is the area median income? And what is 40% of that? And what does that real number mean? And understanding, okay, well, listen, that's what they say that means, but even understanding that AMI is an inflated number because it takes into account surrounding counties that are more affluent than we are. There is a real number that applies to CB9. So never mind all this AMI stuff, there's a real number that applies to us. Don't tell me, well, we're giving half of the AMI. Still a lot of people that afford that.
What is it?
And that's repetitive because if you map like one side of Empire versus the other side of Empire, you're gonna get a very different AMI depending on if, you know, some places like, say, Ebbets Field area, Tivoli Towers, if you encapsulate that area right now, it's gonna be pretty low, you know, average medium income is gonna be fairly low. But if you include average in the other side of the historic district, it's gonna go up higher. You know, it depends on how you draw the map and how you use the data to calculate that. And because of all those new developments that have opened, which is, I think, 2 huge, pretty big developments just opened up, are accepting applications. One coming, the third one. 4 actually very close to where I live. 4, those are gonna, the AMI is gonna go up, the average medium income of what people are making. But they sometimes, they skew the map, they take in a different area of how, so it becomes manipulated, so they make a higher AMI than what it really should be for the people that say, you know, middle income, you know, lower income housing. I'm on the yearly committee, so just so you know, so I study this a lot, but I didn't know anything before, but
And that's the challenge, I mean, that's exactly the
it's
challenge.
hard to learn, but it's
Because if we talk about
worthwhile.
AMI numbers, we should understand what they mean, because, you know, let's just use quick math. If I make $100,000 and somebody else makes $40,000, the average of that is 70,000. So if you say, oh, listen, we're gonna do 50% AMI at 70,000 or something like that, it's like, you know, well, no, I mean, I'm messing up that. But the point being, there are people who earn way more
Absolutely.
and people who earn way less. So even that average, you know, if you've taken a 50 or 60% AMI, it's still more than a lot of people make in the district.
So they have a basic, but do they have a basic number?
They do, but that number, and what I'm saying is, that's the number we should be questioning. What number, because like they'll come at you and they'll tell you there's bands we can do. We can do 120% of AMI, we can do 80% of AMI, we can do 60% of AMI. All of that stuff sounds ridiculous to most of the people in my neighborhood. They couldn't afford any of those.
Well, do the developers have to know?
The developers know,
Uh-huh.
but the point being, if they came to you and said, listen, I offered you 60 and 80, you know, a whole range of AMIs and everything like that.
And they say it's all affordable, you know?
And it's all affordable, but here's the thing, if the real AMI for the district is 10%, where it's like, most of my people can only afford like 20% or 30%, would you give me 2 studios at 20 or 30%, what does that really mean? I know, there's a lot of numbers we're throwing around, and that's part of the conversation, I wanna make sure we're up to date on that one. And we'll put the resources so that way everybody understands, but I guess what the charge is, what I wanna, I guess the task I'm putting before this committee is to come up with a real picture of what housing, what we need here in CB9, and what's real for our people here.
An understanding of
I'm sorry?
how it all come to be, the process.
Okay, and we can do trainings, on that as well. So one of the things I'm already putting down is, I think, we're gonna work with Borough Hall, or we'll see if we can bring somebody in to have a conversation on zoning, period, so you understand what that means. And then I think people are identifying good resources, so I appreciate what you did with Just Fix.
Yeah.
There's other places, other resources we can get people to come in as well and talk about the housing aspects, AMI, how that's derived and things of that nature.
There's some pretty good stuff that I think is online, because they did a zoning thing, the board, the borough president did not too long ago, it's probably all online. But I think specific for our district is more important to understand, like what our, where our commercial districts are, what people are paying now, what they need to stay here, right? Like I know it's a big problem, people have a family, those kids grow up and they wanna stay here. They wanna stay here and they have a good job, they have a teacher job, they have working for the hospital, they're making a good amount of money, but they still can't, they're working for the city council and they can't afford to live here.
As the next step for the committee members, I'm gonna go and look up what the AMI is for this district, CB9. So not what the area median income is for New York City, tri-state area, but I'll figure out what is the AMI for the neighborhoods that are represented in CB9. And I'll bring that back to the committee next month.
Thank you very much, appreciate that.
I'd like to follow up on some things, my deep dive into Just Fix, there's a couple of things that, I don't remember the gentleman's name, but the gentleman who did the thing for us, he was very open and sort of like, hey, if you guys, anything that we could sort of add as a tool. So there's a couple of things that I would like to reach out to see if he can, they can sort of put these tools in. For one, building sales, the majority of large buildings in this district, and I mean large, like over, 50 unit buildings, are owned by a handful of people, or LLCs and now, some, but a handful, and they own, I mean, my building is owned by the Millers, and that's a 50 building, organization right there. I mean, like huge, burdens of property, and understanding, these buildings change hands because they have to change hands every couple of years for them to be able to like get around their tax requirements and so on, because they're so big now that they don't have the equity, they don't have the cash to handle all the things that they have to handle, even from city, like from that being imposed by the city, right? So like, for example, when pandemic happened, and I watched, I mean, I could literally watch from my kitchen window and see that there was a moving van almost daily. People were just leaving they were just leaving. They were leaving without even giving notice. They were letting their deposits go and they were just leaving. And, my building was manager and owner, they were hemorrhaging because without money coming in, without revenue, the whole thing stops, so even if it's just to pay the fines that they're being fined by, by the city, they couldn't even keep up with that because there was just a mass exodus. So I think part of this conversation that I wanna put into this Just Fix is understanding, when's the last time this building was was sold, who was it sold to, from who to who, all that stuff is public information, we can see that in the, in finance, you know, in the Department of Finance, and understanding like what comes along with that change of, what does that mean to the tenant, right? The next building owner, what are they inheriting, and what does that mean to you if you live in that building? So I'd like to follow up with them to see if I can, I've already started a couple of bullets of things that they could add on to that, and see if I can come back to you guys with some.
That
Does that include the new buildings also? Like the new developments also, Just Fix, does that include them?
I
Because
didn't,
sometimes they change hands also.
they do, and I was just looking at stabilized buildings
Okay.
simply because there's enough, there's enough history on them. I haven't run any new building addresses yet, I could.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it would be good to see how much data.
Sure,
we can
it would be a
get.
good compare and contrast to see, you know, but yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
along
'cause
those
the new
lines.
buildings are probably not on there, cause there's.
Yeah, I don't know, and I mean, for us, it's good because also a lot of the abatements that were given, you know, on some of these buildings are expiring, and what that's gonna mean for
That's
the
true.
people who live in them, because the stabilization that we all hold near and dear is going to, that safety net is going to go with the expiration,
It's gonna
and
change.
residents need to understand what that means for them.
It's also applying to the buildings too, like how you apply for a building, even if you have some income. I met a woman walking down my street at Sullivan Place, and she looked kinda lost, and I said, hey, what's up? And she's like, well, I used to live here, and I live in Staten Island now, but I'm trying to move back. And she was going from building to building. She started at the end, at Nostrand on that new development that was where the market was. And then she was in front of these two new developments that are down Sullivan, and then she was asking me where the other ones were, and I walked with her for a little while to show her where the Sullivan and Bedford was, and the Franklin Avenue and the Botanica. I showed her where all of them were, and she was just trying to find a way. She was having trouble gaining access. She was a, you know, older woman, probably, 70. Looking to come back here, and people knew her too. When we were walking on the street, a couple people came up to her. She's like sad. She was on Staten Island, and she wanted to come. And people were ignoring her and I saw her treating her rudely when she went to the door going to the building. They were like, no, She was just, she has some income. She has,
Yeah.
trying to come back. Like, what do we do? Like, that's a person that was right there in front of me. I didn't know about that. That application for that politician was having, somebody,
Oh,
person was having.
yeah, the housing
I
application.
didn't know, but this is just this week, I didn't know about it, and I would've told her that, but she was struggling, and, I would like to be able to help people like that, like, as a board, as a community here.
And from that communication piece, just from that, what you're talking about, that, when we hear about these things, cause it's not as much as we used to, but I mean, all these projects, they always talk about, oh, there's a housing lottery or whatever else that happens after that, or an application process. To that point, we could probably figure out a way to connect people at, where it's like, listen, when it's in the district, this is where you need to go, how you need to apply. Housing Connect is, where I guess
But
people
it's
are
like, even beyond Housing Connect, like some of these buildings, it's, how do you get into them?
You see, that's the thing,
She
that's part
couldn't
of the
figure it
process.
out, like, they're not on Housing Connect.
That's how brokers make money. That's how brokers used to make them, used to make their money, I guess. You go to the broker, and the broker will tell you where these apartments are.
Well, it would be lovely to be able to really give, be able to talk to people, help them find housing.
Okay,
Bye, Kristen.
you got a couple minutes? I think you might.
You want to say something before you go?
Farewell.
Well, listen, I
You
mean,
gotta visit our garden.
I'll tell you, what, if you can give me 2 minutes, I think we might be able to wrap up. So really the assignment is just going to be, and again, I just want to really kind of understand what you guys have been working on. Just kind of put out there in terms of some of the things that I would like to see happen. So next steps, we're gonna get a chair for this committee. I would like for the committee to come back and have some of these things on their agenda and flesh these out in terms of what the priorities are gonna be over the next couple of months in terms of getting data, getting information, and offering recommendations in terms of how the board can move. And that last piece is what we're looking at is I wanna develop a community profile for housing. So that way we know, and all the board knows what the data is, and people can look at it and say, this is what the information about what housing looks like and priorities. And especially so we set the stage for when we go to the zoning conversations. because this will feed the zoning conversations in terms of what we are expecting in terms of that. And then there's a whole other tranche of things in terms of services and things that we need to bring into the district for that. So that's mostly what I had with that, but again, I just wanna make sure that we have a definitive statement of CB9 defines what do we mean. So I think we were talking about setting up a mission or meeting charge or the goals. That's gonna be the goal over the next couple of months. So like I said, you'll probably have a new chair by next month, but by January, you'll see me again, cause I wanna be a part of that conversation, or help you with the conversation in terms of what we're looking for. Okay? Alright, are there any questions for me?
You know what, I think what you just said, I think that was one of the things that, that was tabled from our last meeting. I think it was was that the, housing profile?
Yeah, how's it, probably, yeah, I think I said so.
Yeah, she had tabled, that,
Okay,
Jolie, she had tabled that.
okay, so that's fine.
Probably would have been something we would have talked about today.
She
So-
was also gonna set up a sort of internal communication for committee members that
Yeah, everybody
I-
agreed to it.
Yeah, and I all I got was a a calendar hold, but there was no, so I would like to see, because I would also like to be able to, like, as we're all individually doing our things, to be able to kind of like, either if assistance is needed and say, hey, I don't know too much about this, you do, what do you think, this is what I'm finding, we can sort of like reach out to each other, so that we're all arriving a little bit more on the same page and prepared and so on. Cause there's definitely, there's a lot of things I don't know that, you guys know that would be helpful to just be able to shoot an email out and say, hey, this is what I'm finding, do you have any, and
Okay, so,
Did she share that list with you?
I'm sorry?
Jolie, did she share the list with you, the email list
No,
for,
I haven't seen that, so, and it's not important, I mean, if you guys are on it and you have it, I mean, we'll make sure that that's something, if it's something that's gonna be helpful for you, we'll see what we can do to make sure that happens.
Cause I haven't
But we'll
seen
make sure we
it.
speak with the next leader, next chair to make sure that they're able to support you with that. Alright then, okay, so listen, so I'm not gonna keep everybody much longer than
I
that.
just looked it up first real quick, so everybody, I think this might be wrong, but it says the median income, household income for CB 89 Brooklyn is 73.8K as of 2023, seems kinda high, but our poverty level is 17.7, which is kinda high.
And that's the number that concerns me, so we have 17.7% at poverty. So in terms of, yeah, there's a median income, but I think we have a lot of people below the curve. So I wanna figure out what's the real number that helps. There's some of us who don't need the help, it's like, no,
It
they
says
can afford
Data
it.
USA is a source, so we could
Data
use,
USA?
we could look at different data sets. I just looked quickly on AI,
Okay,
just to get an idea, to give you an idea of,
okay,
cause I wanna know this stuff as well.
no, and.
I can send you guys that analysis that I did, I just don't know where to send it.
I'll give
For
you
you,
my,
as
I'll
long
give
as,
you
as long as you send it to the board office and
Right.
just say, please distribute,
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll do that.
They'll
I'll
take
do
care of that and
that.
they'll get it to the
Great, cause it's already,
well, I'm not on a
Completed.
committee, so I would just give you my email.
alright then. So listen, so that is all I have. Again, thanks to everyone for your service, for taking this on. This is extra, I know you have lives and everything we do, so I thank you on behalf of the board for all the sacrifices and the commitment you have. And I'm here to support, and the executive committee is here to support, as is the board office. Thank you, everyone. We have completed our agenda. We are adjourned. Time is now 8:11. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night, everyone.
okay, then,
yeah,
Am I right, Sam?
I,
sure.
Yeah.